Okay, it looks like about 75% of you said potatoes and 25% of you said broccoli. The correct answer is potatoes. And this does include fresh, canned, frozen, dried, and juice. Okay, hello everybody. This is Sophie from Spark Policy Institute. Thank you for joining us again today. Today's webinar, which is jointly hosted by the Colorado Farm to School Task Force, Spark Policy Institute, and Healthy Farms, Healthy People Coalition, is called Making Evaluation Easy, Collecting and Analyzing Data for Your Farm to School Evaluation. We've got almost everybody on who's registered, so we'll go ahead and get started. A few housekeeping points one more time so that everybody's on the same page. There are currently 2 ways to hear audio for today's webinar. One is automatically through your computer speakers, and the other is via the teleconference using the call-in number listed on the screen. We do currently have all participants in the audio conference on mute to reduce background noise. We will not be holding a verbal question and answer period, but instead we'll be asking people to type into the chat box and at the right side of your screen. When you do send a chat, please make sure to select Send to All Panelists so that both Lynn and I can see your responses. Unfortunately, participants cannot see each other's chats, but I will be reposting the chats to everybody so that we can all learn from each other. I do want to let you know that today we will be recording the webinar, and the recording will be posted on the Colorado Farm to School website. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to our presenter, Lynn Kathleen from Spark Policy Institute. Lynn?
Thank you, Sophie, and welcome back, everybody. So we have a very busy webinar again today, and we will be running through many slides. As you all know, the drill here is that you will get the full version of slides with my talking points after we do this. So really your job today is to listen, enjoy, get inspired, get maybe a little bit confused, and therefore ask some questions. And we will be having times throughout doing both polls as well as chats and questions. And you guys have been a really great group. You have been very interactive with us, and you have asked some really excellent questions. So I am setting the bar high, and I expect that we will continue with that. So let's get going. So as you know, your 2 people today is both me, Lynn Kathleen, and Sophie Oppenheimer, and we're both here at Spark Policy Institute. And Spark Policy Institute is actually in Denver, Colorado, but we work all over the country, and we develop innovative research-based approaches to help our partners solve complex societal problems that defy easy solutions. And if ever there was one that is surprisingly hard, I think it's farm to school, because it seems as though it should be pretty straightforward. But as we all know, if we work in it, it's not at all. The task force, which is the group that is behind our evaluation toolkit, was legislatively mandated in 2010 by the Colorado General Assembly, and it has 15 appointed members. It is charged with increasing the use of local farm and ranch products in school food service programs to improve child nutrition and to strengthen our local and regional agricultural economies. So the task force actually receives no state funding. I always like to say this because I think that the Colorado Task Force is an unusual entity in that regard. Many of the state entities around farm to school are usually somehow have state funding. Our task force never did receive any state funding. However, they did receive what I like to call action mandates, and this has allowed them to be very excitable to a number of our foundations. So our foundations find the work that they do to be something they really fund and want to fund. And so we have a number of different funders over the course of the 4 years that they have existed. And one of those funding actually includes the USDA Farm to School grant, which we landed in order to bring you nationwide this toolkit through webinars as well as through in-person workshops. So today's webinar is the 4th in the 5-part series of the Farm to School Evaluation Toolkit. We'll be focusing on how to collect and analyze evaluation data. All of our webinars, as you know, are archived at the link on this slide, and at the end of this webinar, we'll send out the slides with all of my talking points. So let's get started. We like to always do this poll to find out who's on right now and how much have you been participating with us. So I'm going to let Sophie do a quick poll with you.
Hi, everybody. Some of you may notice that I've opened the polling panel on the right side of your screen, and we're just wondering who has attended or viewed the webinars to date. And the options are that you've seen all 3 previous webinars in the series, you have seen some but not all the previous webinars, or this is the first webinar in the series you've attended. And regardless if you've been able to join us live or if you've seen the archive versions, both of those count. I'm going to go ahead and leave it open for maybe 20 more seconds. Looks like some of you are still answering. Okay, great. It looks like the majority of you have seen some of the previous webinars, and then some of you have seen all 3. There are a few of you where this is the first webinar in the series that you've seen, so welcome to everybody.
Great. Okay. So we appreciate those who have come back, and we, of course, always welcome our newcomers. For those of you who are new, all of our webinars are archived, and so you can always go back and take a look at them. So you should have received these handouts after you signed up. If you haven't, please do go to our Farm to School website, or you can look at the things that have been posted, the links that have been posted in our chat box. What we need to do today is to work again with our evaluation plan template. And you should have, if you've been working with us, already have filled out step 1, which is to prepare for your evaluation. Step 2, identify your outcomes. And step 3, select and adapt your measurement tools. And you would have started on step 4 to complete your evaluation plan. Today, we're going to start with a quick overview of what we've learned so far, and then we're going to look at different types of data collection strategies. From there, we'll discuss how to analyze qualitative and quantitative data. As always, we'll end with a few links to additional resources and how to sign up for the last webinar in this series if you haven't done so already. And of course, there'll be Q&A. By the end of this training, you will have increased your knowledge about data collection and analysis, learned how to implement your evaluation, and of course, continued along the path of building your confidence and skills to undertake your Farm to School evaluation. So let's take a real quick look at where we have been. Let's first start with that brief overview of the Farm to School Evaluation Toolkit. The Toolkit overview walks you through each step of the evaluation process. We began the series with an overview of the toolkit and filling out step 1 of the evaluation plan template. In week 2, we identified outcomes and target audiences for your evaluation. Last week, we focused on step 3 and began step 4. And today, we're working on step 5, which is completing your evaluation plan. In our webinar training series, we cover every step, and you'll work with the template and attachments along the way. An important tool in the toolkit is the evaluation plan template. This is the document you have all been systematically filling out each week. Let's have a quick reminder of what we covered last week, as that learning is highly related to what we're going to do today. Last week, we talked about quantitative and qualitative methods, including the advantages and challenges to each. We also looked at some guidelines for how to adapt an existing tool and develop your own questions. We introduced some questionnaire design best practices about the wording of questions. And finally, we talked about the critical importance of pre-testing your instrument, even if you decide to use an existing data collection without changing any of its questions. You still have never had a chance to use it with your particular audience, and that's why pre-testing is so critical. Finally, at the end of last week's webinar, you began filling out the steps involved for each of your data collection efforts, assigned a timeline to each step, and identified key staff who would be responsible for a given step. Before we go any further, I'd like to hear what your current plans are about data collection types. So I'm going to hand this over to Sophie.
Hi, everybody. So again, on the right side of your screen, I've opened up the polling panel, and the question is, what types of data will you be collecting? We have mostly quantitative, which is numbers, mostly qualitative, which is words, both quantitative and qualitative, or you're not sure yet. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this open for about 30 more seconds. It looks like some of you have not started, and some of you are still working. And for those of you who have just popped in, we are currently running a poll. I'm going to leave it open for about 10 more seconds. You will find it at the right side of your screen. Okay, great. So let's see here. I think I can read this. It looks like the majority of you, about 86%, are going to collect both quantitative and qualitative data. And then we have just a small percentage of you who are going to collect mostly qualitative. We have nobody collecting straight quantitative.
So not to show my bias, but I'm really glad nobody's just doing straight numbers. So numbers are really important. I love that so many of you are doing qualitative and quantitative. But if you're going to just pick one, it might as well be qualitative because you're really going to be able to dig into a lot of such important in-depth information. So let's get going so we can look at how you're actually going to go about analyzing all of this. Okay, so first I want to acknowledge that these webinars really are becoming very, very rich in content. And so I want to just really encourage you, as I did at the beginning, but I want to reiterate it, that I just want you to jot down those things that are important to you, to remember, or, that you want to go back to when you do get these talking points that we send to you, or that you want to ask questions on today. So think of yourself as sitting in a lecture hall and you didn't have, any particular great way to take notes other than a little pad of paper to jot down a few things. And just, just listen and listen carefully. Okay. So I'm going to actually start with this cartoon so you can read it and look at it. It's a very fun cartoon because I love the message here. It brings into question the potential messiness and unexpectedness of data collection. So here we have to ask, who's actually collecting data and what type of data is being collected and what does that data mean? So no doubt, the postgraduate student believes he is the data collector. He's counting how many times the mouse hits the lever as a response to an experimental stimulus. He's conducting what we would call a quantitative study. It will lead to, at a minimum, some descriptive statistics of counts and percentages in response to the stimulus. But the postgraduate student isn't the only data collector here. Indeed, the mouse is conducting her own experiment. She's watching the graduate student's reactions every time she pushes on the lever, her experimental stimulus. She's conducting a qualitative study, noting the human's emotions and reactions to her experiment. So this cartoon is very fun, and it says one more important thing, that what we think we are collecting may not be what we are actually wanting to collect. So last week's webinar helped you set up for success to ask the right questions and track the meaningful activities and actions. But now we have to keep in mind about the way we collect our data to ensure that we're collecting what we intended to collect. During the first webinar in this series, we talked about existing data and the importance of identifying what's already being collected that could be useful to your evaluation. One question submitted in last week's post-webinar survey was how to get a food service director to share his or her records. The most successful strategy will be to ask your food service director to join your evaluation team. There are many reasons for recruiting different people to be on your evaluation team, but one of those is to have access to existing data or people to help you get access to surveying and interviewing. If you're not able, in this case, to recruit a food service director or another key stakeholder on your team, the next best option is to explain to that person the purpose of your evaluation and ask if there are any specific issues they would like to learn about through your evaluation. So here, you would be getting the opportunity to get some important feedback. Plus, you would be creating buy-in, so when you do ask for their records or ask them for some help, they'll be more willing to work with you. And the same goes with other school records. Remember to make connections early in your evaluation planning with all those people who will be important to the successful implementation of your evaluation. So another thing that's really important to remember is that you shouldn't be drowning in data. Before you decide which data collection instrument you will use and how you will adapt it, consider these 3 questions. What types of data are you and your evaluation team comfortable analyzing and summarizing? If you do not have anyone on your team who knows how to analyze scale data, so for example, rate an aspect on a scale of from 1 to 5, then you should opt for what we call categorical data like yes and no, where you can report on counts or percentages. Remember, the more questions you ask, the more data you'll collect, which means the more data you will need to analyze. And as we mentioned last week, you'll want to keep your data collection focused and efficient, both for yourself, but also for your participants. Open-ended questions produce qualitative data. So don't be fooled into thinking qualitative data is easier to analyze or summarize than quantitative data. We're going to talk about how to analyze both types today, and you'll see that analyzing qualitative data is a systematic process too. Be smart and only use open-ended questions where a closed-ended question really won't capture the information you need to know. And then finally, I guess there were really 4 points, let technology help you out whenever possible. Online survey sites are a great way to lessen the burden of collecting your data, whether you're doing a survey or an interview. But it's not just about technology. Automation can refer to being strategic about where and when you collect your data. So for example, if you want teachers to complete your survey, find out if there is a teacher planning meeting in the school and then see if you can distribute your survey at the meeting. Leave a box in the room for completed surveys to be deposited. So you're really going to think about, this whole component around how do I collect the data, who am I collecting it from, and given those 2 things, where is the best place to really do that, what is the timing, and so on. Now I want to focus on the data that you will be collecting through your different types of data collection instruments. First, we'll talk about common ways of collecting quantitative data. First, let's consider why you would collect quantitative data. Numerical data is often gathered for evaluations. Quantitative data is often seen as more objective. Whether or not this is true is actually a topic that could be the sole focus of several webinars. But suffice it to say that there are those out there who believe numbers are less biased and more representative of the population than qualitative data. So if your target audience for your evaluation has this belief, and you really should find out right at the beginning, you'll want to be sure to collect at least some quantitative data. So quantitative data methods are actually very useful if you want to gather information on a lot of people, more than you could, for example, in an interview or doing interviews. It is good for answering questions about what is happening in the program, such as what are the parents' attitudes about the school garden? What are the shifts in students' attitudes toward healthy eating for those who participate in the garden program compared to those who do not? Quantitative data also provides answers to questions about how many, such as how many students are benefiting from the school garden, how many pounds of produce were harvested, and how many producers are selling to the schools. A research design refers to the systematic process by which you will implement your evaluation. It is good to keep in mind your research design, but you also need to be realistic about your capacity and your situation. The key is to be conscious about what you choose to do and what you choose not to do or do somewhat differently. So let's talk first about a research design for quantitative data. These steps are typically followed. First, you'll figure out who you are targeting and how to draw a sample, and more on this shortly. You'll develop and pilot your instruments. We talked about that testing last week. You'll implement your data collection through, say, a survey. You'll decide on that instrument. You'll analyze your data, and then you'll discuss your findings with the evaluation team and key stakeholders. So remember, you're not in this alone, and the interpretation of results should actually be a collective effort. It should not just be you at your computer. Then finally, you're going to write your report and create your presentations and share and use those results. So you do not need, nor do you want to evaluate every site and survey every person who's involved in your farm to school program. You have neither the time nor the resources, and happily, drawing a sample is simple and common in research and an evaluation. So for a quantitative study, you're going to consider the purpose of your evaluation to decide what type of sample to take. You probably have all heard of the random sample, and this is often what is considered the right way to choose which people or sites to participate in your evaluation. In a random sample, you are selecting a subset of people within a group to participate in your evaluation. With random selection, each person has an equal probability of being chosen. Random samples are meant to produce an unbiased representation of a group. There's also something called a stratified random sample. So similar to a random sample and how it generates a sample, a stratified random sample begins by dividing the population to be studied into smaller groups and then randomly selecting participants within each group. So for example, if you are evaluating school gardens in a large district, you could divide up your gardens by, say, the year they started, 5 or more years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, 1 to 2 years ago. And within those 3 groups of gardens, you would randomly select the participants for your evaluation. Purposeful samples are when you want to take a look and you're interested at learning some very specific outcomes. So you look at those outcomes and the purpose of your evaluation to guide your selection of sites and groups to evaluate. So for example, if you want to examine whether students have increased consumption of fruits and vegetables and you are particularly interested in the increased access and consumption among lower income children, then you would select a school in your district that has a high free and reduced lunch rate. While it might be really nice to learn about all the changes in eating behaviors among all of your students who have a salad bar with local produce, it's not necessary to find out about everyone if your main interest is about a subset of students. This non-random approach is called purposeful sampling. It is the method by which most of you will choose your sites and target populations. Like most of you will do at some point, you'll want to conduct surveys. So I'm going to actually dig into this type of data collection process for a little bit here. There are many ways to conduct a survey, and the ways seem to be continually changing. So for example, today we have a we had a little technical glitch. Today we have social media or texting polls. So we're going to talk about 4 of the most common formats. It's important to remember that no one survey method is perfect. The best format will largely depend on your purpose, time, and capacity to conduct and analyze the results. Handing out surveys. These are often used at the end of an event or activity to collect immediate feedback. So for example, if you have a garden preparation day in the spring with parent volunteers, you could hand out a survey then. These are a really good choice when you want to capitalize on having those respondents available. You need or want immediate feedback. You have limited resources, and you may not be able to reach that target population again. Or let's say you don't have very much time to collect data from your students using the garden. Well, you could take a similar approach as with the parent volunteers, except in this case, you might divide up your data collection to ask 1 or 2 questions each time the kids are out in the garden. Think about what you would want to learn from the kids, look at what your activities are in the garden each week, and then match up the questions to the activities, hand out a quick 1 or 2 question survey. You could even do a quick pre-post test if you have specific lessons you're doing that very day. Mail surveys are appropriate under certain conditions, which include you have a complete and accurate mailing list, the people you are surveying are likely to respond, You want respondents to have time to consider their answers. You want respondents to have privacy when taking the survey. And your respondents are unlikely to have access to the internet. Telephone surveys are appropriate when you need results relatively fast. Your target audience has phones and you know their phone numbers. Your target audience would have difficulty completing a written questionnaire. The survey questions are short and easy to understand, and the survey has only a few questions, and you have people who can do the calling. Face-to-face interviews tend to gather the most reliable and complete survey data, so you're doing it as it feels like an interview, but you're actually using your survey instrument. But this kind of survey data collection is very time-consuming and expensive to implement, but it is appropriate when there is no contact list for your population that you want to survey, and there is a concern that the people will not respond to a self-administered survey. It's also appropriate when the questions are a bit more complicated, so people might want to have a little bit more explanation about what it is you're trying to ask, and also if budget or time is not an issue. And then finally, these days electronic surveys are very common and for good reason. They are an inexpensive way to administer a survey, and many people communicate electronically. Email surveys are best when the target audience is reachable through an email, so of course you have to know their address. The survey is short and simple and you need results quickly. Web-based surveys are best when the target audience are regular internet users. The survey is a bit more complex. You or someone on your evaluation team knows how to use web-based internet services, and you know how to pull the data off of your website. But that we're going to give you a little bit of teaching on today anyway. So thinking about the different survey data collection formats that I just was talking about, which types do you think you'll want to implement?
Okay, hi everybody. So you'll see that I've opened the polling panel on the right side of your screen. And as Lynn said, we're wondering what type of survey format you would like to use. The options are handout surveys, mail surveys, telephone surveys, face-to-face surveys, email surveys, or web surveys, or none. Again, at the right side of your screen, you should see the polling panel, and it looks like most of you are in the process of filling that out, so that's great. And on this particular poll, you can select several, so you can select all that apply to you. I'm going to leave it open for about 10 more seconds. It looks like some people are still selecting their answers. Okay, great. So it looks like about half of you are going to use handout surveys. 25% of you are thinking about using email surveys, and the other 25% are thinking of using web surveys. We have no telephone surveys, mail surveys, or face-to-face surveys.
Terrific. I think those are all really good choices, and they make a lot of sense to me on farm-to-school programs. So let's get going because we're going to be able to learn about all of those. So because many of you will actually use an online survey in some form or another, and even if you're not, I'm going to tell you how this is going to apply to you anyway. Let's spend a little bit of time looking at this format using examples from several farm-to-school surveys that we here at Spark have implemented. So all different types of question formats are actually possible with most online survey services. Here is a screenshot of a multiple choice question, which can be set up to allow only one answer, or as shown here, allow the respondent to select multiple answers. The multiple choice question is set up as a table, which is an efficient way for respondents to answer a series of similar questions. In this case, we are interested in learning what types of assistance a district needed to help them with their farm-to-school program. So our options were a bit more fun than just yes, no, maybe, and also gave us a bit more information. So districts could tell us if they were doing okay, needed some help, weren't interested now, or they were just unsure about it. Here is basically the same question in the previous slide, but formatted to provide the full verbatim language that an interviewer would use when conducting a person-to-person telephone interview. So you would use a telephone interview when you need to get those specific people, or in our case, school districts, to participate, and possibly because you also want an opportunity to begin to build a relationship or build awareness about what you are offering. Here is a scale question, where respondents rate the statements on a 5-point scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. It's important that you always label each of your scale choices so there is no ambiguity or confusion about what the scale value means. You should always give the option of unsure or not applicable or no opinion on scale questions. SurveyMonkey and other online survey tools have the ability to set up ranking questions. So here respondents were asked to rank each of the 10 statements, where 1 equals the most critical activity needed to create a healthy food environment, and 10 being the least critical for them. Rankings instead of scales are actually a good choice when you need to get a sense of prioritization. Finally, surveys online can have open-ended questions, which will result in qualitative data. So you will need to analyze the open-ended questions differently than you would do the quantitative data. So all of those screenshots I just showed you are also very much applicable to a mail survey or to an in-person survey, the whole idea of how you would format it and set it up. There are many online survey programs, so all of these have free versions. The free versions typically limit you in some way by the number of questions you can ask or the number of respondents allowed. However, paid accounts are typically quite inexpensive. So I'm going to do another poll. Let's stop for a moment and find out about your experience with online surveys, because we're going to talk about how to use online surveys and online sites to actually do some data analysis. So even if you think that this is not quite where you're at, we're really interested in understanding where you are with your comfort level.
Okay, hi everybody. Once again, I've opened the polling panel at the right side of your screen. And the question is, what is your comfort level with creating an online survey? We have several options. One is, I've done it before and found it fun. I've done it before but struggled. I've not done it, but I'm excited to get going. This is new to me and I'm a bit nervous. I would not, could not, on a train, in a plane, on a boat, or with a goat. I'm going to go ahead and leave this open for about 15 more seconds as I see answers are still rolling in. Okay, great. It looks like the majority of you have done it before and found it fun. Some of you have done it before but struggled, and then some of you have not done it before but are excited to do it. So that's great.
So that's really interesting, because so many of you did say that you're going to do in-person handout surveys, and yet many of you have already done work on online surveys. So I really like that, because it tells me that you're choosing to do the handed out surveys because that is what makes sense to you, as opposed to you're afraid to do an online survey. So that's perfect. Really good. Okay, let's keep going. So now we're going to turn our attention to qualitative data collection. Qualitative data has a very specific place in evaluation. If a survey generates hard to explain or inconsistent findings, following up with a series of focus groups or interviews to illuminate the numbers is a really important use of qualitative data collection. When numerical outcomes are so diverse that they become neutralized when averaged together, you can use case studies to convey important individualized outcomes that the numbers really just don't reveal. And when long-term program outcomes are difficult to measure, you can capture intermediary shifts in attitudes and behaviors through individual interviews. Interviews are also an excellent way to bubble up success stories that you could not have imagined and cannot be relayed in numerical data. Qualitative methods deepen, validate, and further describe your quantitative findings. So let's take a quick look at the ideal qualitative research design. So remember, just like the quantitative research design, you want to know what is a best practice, but then be thoughtful in your choices as you consider what is realistic. So a best practice start is that you will first define your sample. And again, we'll be talking about exactly what a qualitative sampling strategy looks like. Last week, you learned how to develop a set of thoughtful, targeted, unbiased questions. So of course, you're going to do that again. You'll use systematic process for analyzing your qualitative data, and we'll talk about that today. You're going to share your results with your evaluation team and stakeholders to get their interpretation, just like you do in quantitative analysis. And then, of course, you're going to report and write your report and your presentation, share and use your results. And all of those kinds of things we're going to talk about in our very last webinar next week. So qualitative sample considerations are somewhat different than quantitative, yet they share the idea of being purposeful. Essentially, what you want is to select individuals from who you have the most to learn, the ones that can provide insight and deep understanding regarding the topic of interest. So there's several techniques that are available for selecting samples of information-rich cases. I'll just point out 3 of the most common strategies. The first one is called maximum variation sampling. So this is a heterogeneous sample that includes individuals with diverse characteristics and experiences. The idea is that any patterns that would emerge across a diverse set of individuals would be valuable in describing experiences central or core to most individuals. Homogeneous sampling is another way, and in contrast to maximum variation sampling, homogeneous sampling means individuals are selected according to a narrow set of common characteristics. This is most often used in selecting participants for focus groups. And then we often do snowball sampling. And this is a recruitment technique in which research participants are asked to assist researchers in identifying other potential subjects. So you could ask a participant to identify other people they believe would have important perspectives about the school garden, for example. You could specify to that person to identify someone who holds a very different perspective or someone who has a different experience than they had if you're interested in maximizing the diversity of your answers. Regardless of the strategy you choose, you should document it. It will become information about your methods, either incorporated into your final report or as supporting documentation that you're going to share upon request. It is likely the qualitative data collection method you use most likely will be interviewing. So I'm going to take a look at interviewing. There are really 5 data collection steps involved in interviews. First, you'll finalize the interview questions, which will happen after you have pre-tested the instrument. Next, you'll identify the interviewees as determined by your sample selection strategy. Do not underestimate the importance of using your evaluation team members and other key stakeholders to recruit interviewees. You'll have a better participation rate if someone who knows the person or who is held in high regard requests their participation in the evaluation. When you conduct the interviews, be sure you do not exceed the amount of time it would take that you said you would take. So it's important to respect a person's schedule, and you'll want your interviewees to care about and maybe act upon the evaluation results too. Another good reason to try to respect their time as best as you can. And then finally, you'll need to type up the notes as you are conducting the interview. So the easiest way to do that is to conduct an interview over the phone, though you can also take your computer and type as you're interviewing. If you are typing up notes as you're doing the interview, allot time immediately afterwards to clean them up when your memory of the conversation is fresh. Let's consider 3 types of interviews. There is the general interview guide approach, which is intended to ensure that the same general areas of information are collected from each interviewee. This provides some focus but allows a great degree of freedom and adaptability in getting information from your interviewee. Then there's what we call the standardized open-ended interview, and it asks the same questions of all interviewees. This approach facilitates faster interviews that can be more easily analyzed and compared. Most of the interview instruments we identified for the Farm to School Toolkit are of this type. And then finally, there are the closed fixed response interview, is where all interviewees are asked the same questions and asked to choose among answers. that are all of the same. So this is really like reading a survey to an interviewee, or an interviewee, yes. Let's give you a chance to match outcomes to methods. I have 3 scenarios for you to consider. You'll be typing your answers into the chat box, and I'll read them as they come in. So, okay, let's get started. This is the, interacting with this part and really thinking through it. Your farm to school program, scenario number 1, includes a school garden that the kindergartners and first graders are helping in. You conduct taste tests of the produce they are growing and harvesting. Now you want to know if the garden experiences has changed their attitudes towards fresh fruits and vegetables. So I want you to tell us about the type of data. Is it going to be qualitative or quantitative that you're going to collect? The type of data collection tool you'll use. Is it going to be a survey, interview, focus group? And why you have chosen the type of data you're going to use and the collection tool. So that takes a little bit of typing fastness and, of course, takes a little bit of time to do. So we will give you time to give us some answers. And I will read off your answers so everybody can hear them and we can learn from each other. Okay, I know you're out there typing madly away. Remember, it's young children. Okay, we're going to give you a little bit more time. If you select send to all panelists, then both Sophie and I can see it. Okay, great. So I have mixed, okay, great. Okay, great, sorry. Here's one. Qualitative, using focus groups, because it makes more sense to discuss them in person as opposed to having them fill something out due to their age. I think that's a really great. It makes a lot of sense. The caveat I would add there is that because they are small kids, they have more limited time detention spans. So you might think about, just really only focusing on one question and getting them to talk about that. Another one, a quantitative survey that is interviewer administered. Yes, nice. That's very good too, because again, you know that the kids can't read. And so it's a very good way to collect the interview data is to have an adult or an older child actually in the school administer the survey. Another one, quantitative food preference survey, or tried it, liked it, loved it kind of test before and after, and also observational data. Nice, those are all really good. That gives you a lot of different ways of thinking about how to capture what they have liked and not liked. And then another one, which is a qualitative one with pictures for answer choices. So yes, we talked about that somewhat last week too. I love that idea because pictures are definitely, those are just as good for doing, for doing data collection, and it's absolutely appropriate with the young ones. And then the last one I'm going to read is mixed methods triangulation. So here is a evaluation research speak. So triangulation is a really great way and a succinct way of saying that they're going to use a number of different data collection methods so that they can really figure out what's going on, because one method might give them some insight, but another method's going to give them a different insight. But when you put it all together, they're really going to see a much bigger picture. So they're going to triangulate. And they are going to do this through a validated cohort survey short survey appropriate for age and interviews of the percent of class to avoid a focus group influence. Great. So you guys have got the scenario thing down. I'm going to try you on another one because it's very fun to watch you be able to come up with these. Notice, by the way, how many different ideas you all had, and that's really kind of the point of us talking about these scenarios, because there's no one perfect way. There are many different ways to do it. What's important is to think carefully through what you're going to do and why you're going to do it, and make sure it makes sense. So here's one. Your Farm to School program included a grant to send your kitchen staff to a culinary boot camp to learn scratch cooking. Now you want to know about how the cafeteria staff feel about using their new skills and the knowledge they have gained about fresh food. So tell us the type of data, qualitative, quantitative, type of data collection tool, and why you're choosing that. And we'll give you a little bit more time. So thank you guys for, typing in. It gives us a little bit of a feeling like we're a group. Okay, this, of course, is about your food service staff. They went through a boot camp. They now know what they're doing. Okay, here we go. Qualitative interview, because you want them to be able to say what they learned instead of choosing from multiple choice options. So I think that that is an absolutely wonderful way to get at both what they learned as well as how they feel about what they learned. And so that's a very nice approach. A quantitative, you could do usage reports, ease and tracking metrics that are relevant to what you're doing. And so I'm going to make a guess on this one that this is really about getting to how different things have now look in what kinds of maybe produce that's coming in and the types of cooking that's happening instead of maybe heat and serve types of things. So that would definitely give very, very clear demonstration of, once you train them up, look what they can do. A quantitative survey in order to widely distribute and get more opinions, but also leave some questions open-ended for more feedback. So again, this is great. That's a kind of mixed method component. A combo quantitative survey asking specific knowledge questions with right or wrong answers. So that's a great one because you're trying to learn, did they really actually, what did they learn in their training? So this is good. An open-ended question about knowledge gained and one for skills gained with follow-up focus group to expand upon the areas of interest that emerge from the survey. So that is a really interesting approach and a really nice research design, and it's one that we really haven't talked about very much, which is the idea that you would do with the same group of people. You would do more than one data collection and a different kind of data collection strategy. And so here, doing a survey first allows for you to collect really quite a lot of information that, and particularly with adding the open-ended question, to be able to understand what would be really great things to now delve into in a focus group format. And so that's a very, very nice research design. I appreciate that one being talked about. Okay. I have to tell you, we have only 10 minutes left, and I know you guys are really good at this, and it's fun to do, but I'm going to skip over scenario number 3 because we have a lot to still get through, and it's important, and I know you're going to care about what's coming up. So let's begin exploring how to analyze data. We'll be doing more of this next week because analysis and choices for how you report results are very much related. We need to look at methods for analyzing both quantitative and qualitative data. So we're going to start with quantitative data. And when you're analyzing numbers and counts, some of the questions you ask in your survey are likely to be yes, no, agree to disagree, or some other type of scale. and a list of options. So these types of questions can best be analyzed by counting up the number of respondents who answered each of the options. If you entered your survey into a spreadsheet such as Excel with one line per survey and each column representing the answer to a question, it makes it very easy to count up the responses. A quick Google search on how to use Excel for statistics, so more than just counts, will bring up many easy ways to do this. So for example, there are web pages, many web pages out there with directions and screenshots and instructions and PDF downloads about how do you go about actually doing these descriptive statistics for your data that you have in your Excel sheets. Unbelievable number of YouTube videos are out there. And so here you would choose the format that best meets your learning style before you know how to do it. And that way you'll become really very adept at doing the Excel analysis and in their spreadsheets. And not only just to do basic analysis, you should know that Excel has the capacity to do some intermediate statistical analyses too. Things we never knew Excel could do. You would be really amazed what's out there and the capacity of your simple, what you always thought was a simple spreadsheet. Online survey programs like SurveyMonkey are actually very useful, not only to collect your data, but also to analyze it. So even if it makes more sense for you to collect your data through paper surveys, like half of you are planning to do, you can enter those surveys you receive into an online survey program and run a summary report. So this would mean you do not really need anyone involved with the evaluation who knows how to analyze data, but you do need to take the time to review the results that SurveyMonkey can generate for you and decide which ones are the most helpful for you as you are trying to report out your evaluation. One person last week posted in our post-webinar survey had asked about statistical packages. So I want to just briefly touch on those. There's actually several very good stat packages for analyzing social science data. Among the most popular are IBM's SPSS, something called SAS, and another Stata. You must buy a license to use each of these, which can be actually quite expensive. However, there are usually discounts for educational buyers. It may be the case that your school district or one of your evaluation team partner organizations actually has a licensed statistical software package that they would let you use to analyze your evaluation data. Another option is a free software called the R Project. So this is actually great. However, the downside to it is that it's a bit more challenging to use than some of the menu-driven softwares like SPSS. So finally, I want to add that these statistical packages are likely unnecessary for the type of analyses you will be doing. You'll be doing what is really called descriptive statistics and analyses, such as frequency distributions or providing averages. You do not need sophisticated, expensive statistical software to do that type of analysis. Now I want to turn our attention to qualitative data analysis. Qualitative data can be overwhelming, the sheer amount that is collected, say in each interview, but also in terms of how to make sense of it. So too much qualitative data and too often qualitative data is simply used to pepper a report with some quotes that demonstrate a point the writer is trying to make. So not only does this underutilize the effort your team and participants put into the evaluation, it actually also misrepresents what you could have learned by doing a more systematic review of your qualitative data. So as much as you want to make it seem more objective by turning, let's say, your qualitative data into numbers, that's actually a poor choice. In the same way, you do not want to use a few quotes as suggesting they represent everyone that you have interviewed. You also don't want to give a percentage or count of the number of interviewees who mentioned a particular aspect of your program. So you can say without signing an actual number that the most frequent response or the most frequent reasons producers cited for wanting to continue selling to schools was their satisfaction, knowing they were feeding healthy food to students in their community. What are the mechanics of coding? Well, there are many ways you can do it, and I'm going to show you just a couple. If you if your notes or transcript is in a word processing file, you could just highlight passages and use comment cards in the margins for coding and labeling a theme. So here are two passages about strategies. In this case, the strategy of using policy to make changes in the school food environment. In the yellow highlighted sentence, the respondent says that sugar-sweetened beverages are not a top priority. The green highlight shows that salad bars is what the respondent really cares about. The comment cards are used as codes or shorthand for the issues of interest. You can also use Excel, here it is again, or some other spreadsheet to organize and categorize your data. Here, the answers to an open-ended survey question are recorded in a spreadsheet, the column marked Q10, along with some demographic data over on those brown headers on the left. On the right side, the blue headers are the coding themes that have emerged in the process of reading the answers. So, if a theme is represented in an answer, a 1 is put in the column of the blue code. A passage can have more than one code. So, for example, we can see that the first response in row 3 has been coded on the themes of political shift and community culture of healthy food. There's also software you can use to code your qualitative data. And until recently, such software has been really quite expensive. But one affordable option now is available online, and it's called DeDoose. That charges a small monthly fee for only the months you actually use the site. For most of you, DeDoose goes well beyond the level of coding you will need, but I wanted you to know about it in case this is the kind of thing that you would like to be able to do. So while DeDoose has a small monthly fee, there are actually other programs that are free. All the free programs have limitations, either in their functionality or the amount of data allowed, but for most of you, these programs will be adequate for your program evaluation. The first one is called QDA Minor Lite, and the other one is called West QDA. There are more than these two free qualitative software programs, but to get you started, you might want to check these out. Once you have your data coded, you have multiple options for how to find patterns and unexpected outcomes. You can sort and reassemble your data by the codes, thereby discovering if there are certain perspectives that are more likely to be articulated by, say, garden leaders than by teachers who use the gardens. You can reassemble the data, sorting the spreadsheet by categories, which are the set of codes and themes that you've already grouped together. You can show relationships among categories or themes, and you can look at the relative weight given to certain types of themes. While not counting, it is interesting and could be insightful to discover that certain groups talk frequently about one thing, but others rarely mention it. Here's a screenshot of the same data, but analyzed in SurveyMonkey. You can create coding categories and assign one or more category to an answer, and then you can display the data by listing the categories, which will show the relative frequency of the code. Here we can see that the comments about a culture of food were mentioned in 50% of the comments. Of course, SurveyMonkey is giving you a number to it. I would tell you, don't report the number. You could just say the most frequent idea that emerged out of your interviews was comments around a culture of healthy food. Word clouds are a fun and easy way to represent ideas that show up frequently in your interviews or focus groups. Several online sites can create these types of word clouds. Okay, so we are actually so close to the end. Like I often like to ask you, what does your audience for your evaluation want to know? And I think this is still a great question to ask because we really just only have 2 more slides, which are our wrap-up slides to talk. So I'm pretty interested in having you tell us, what does your audience that you're targeting to get your evaluation, what is it that they want to know? And we'll have an opportunity for both sharing that. So if you want to share what you believe your audience wants to know, maybe start it out with want to know, and then tell me what. But if you actually have a question, so we're going to kind of combine our Q&A. If you have a question, feel free to also type that at this point. So you could think about your funders. Funders, if you have a funded project, funders usually have very specific things they want to know. What I think is interesting, and I guess I would argue that I hope it changes over time, that a lot of times funders are really just asking for information on what we call our outputs, so you'll remember those counts, instead of our outcomes, which is really all of that being under the sphere of influence. But I'm going to encourage you, even if you have funders who are simply wanting to know, how many garden lessons did you create, and, how many kids were touched by them, and so on. I'm going to encourage you to think about the outcomes that you're trying to do, because I know that none of you are doing that work just so that you can say you created 10 lessons. You're creating those 10 lessons for a reason, for some kind of information that you want those kids to learn. And so it's those outcomes. So think about, what does your audience for your evaluation want to know? And if you don't have that in your head right now, any questions? I'm ready to entertain them. Oh, can you type the website for QDA again, please? So, right, it is on a slide previously, so let me pull that slide up. Oh, can you? Oh, okay, great. How much local procurement is there currently in purchasing for school lunches, and how can we increase these numbers? That's what you want to know. So this is perfect because one of those questions is really, that kind of baseline, how much local procurement is there currently in purchasing for school lunches? So you're really collecting that kind of baseline data right there. And of course, the reason for that is to figure out how can you increase it. So you're doing a couple of different things. One is to be able to start at, where you are. And then the other is, to me, it sounds like not only are you interested in learning, did it increase, so you can have kind of that pre and post test data, but how do you go about increasing it? And so you're really thinking about the methods and the questions, at least in my mind, and the activities and strategies that you're employing, and seeing if those strategies are working for increasing the amount of procurement. Here's another one. Oh, that's the same one. We reposted it. Great. And we also posted the website for the QDA. I'm going to move to our last slide. Well, actually, I forgot. I should move to this slide. By the way, every one of these resources is a fabulous resource. It goes into a lot of different ways that are very, very user-friendly for doing evaluation. And so I encourage you to take a look at these. You don't have to kind of go, oh my gosh, what is it? It's in your overview in the toolkit. The very last page of your toolkit actually has these listed. And if you look at it on your computer, they're hyperlinked, so you can go straight to them. And then finally, of course, the last thing I want to mention is that we have one more webinar, and that is next week, and it's called Reporting Results. And it turns out that who your audience is really going to matter for how you want to report out. And we have a lot of really great tools for helping you think about what is the best method for reporting results, how to identify really what that means based upon audience as well as purpose. So we encourage you to join us for reporting results. If you haven't already signed up, you can do that at the link on this slide. And of course, if you haven't signed up for the virtual forum, we hope that you will. Our toolkit is available both on the Colorado Farm to School website as well as the Spark Policy Social Innovators tool site, and I'm particularly fond of it in that particular format because it has all of the trainings in drop-down menu format as well as the webinars loaded and all of the tools. If you ever have any questions, please do contact us. And I just want to give you one more reminder, which will remind you at the end of next week. But by participating in this series, you are eligible for up to 4 free hours of technical assistance from Spark Policy Institute. And so if you want to take advantage of that, that really means that you are committing to utilizing our toolkit, because that is kind of the purpose of it. And we are more than happy to help you figure out and get you going on that. We have a set of very simple questions you answer if that's something you want to take advantage of. So that wraps up today's webinar. I appreciate very much everybody hanging in there. I know this is supposed to be just an hour, and I keep going over. I think, you know, we have such a great group among you guys. You just have wonderful questions and interactions. So I'm going to just say we're just having a good time, and that's why we're going over. I hope to see all of you in next week's. And you should know, just as a real heads up, that what we always do at the end of the final one is we have a little bonus webinar, which really goes into more depth on displaying your data. And I give you that a heads up because that means for sure we are running over next week. So if you want to make sure that you can hit that bonus webinar too, then block out a little bit more time. Okay, everyone, see you next week. And don't forget to do our post-webinar survey. Thanks. Bye.